It's the middle of the 2014 vintage here in Australia, and astonishingly it's a really strong vintage. What amazed me this year is that climatically you couldn't have drawn a worse roadmap for the year. We started out where first of all we had some hail in both Barossa and McLaren Vale. That was then followed by some horrific frost here in one area of the Barossa Valley in Ebenezer, where one of our dearest growers lost 95% of his vineyard. Then through the summer months we had some of the harshest winds we've ever experienced. We had a lot of wind this season, and then we had a very hot spell in the later part of January. We had 14 days over 40 degrees, which included 4 days over 45 degrees Celsius with a dry north wind. At that stage I wondered how the vineyards were going to survive. I then actually had to travel to the United States before vintage. While I was at a wedding in Chicago, we had one of the greatest downpours of rain we've ever experienced at harvest time. I remember looking at the radar on my phone thinking, well, what's the point of going home because there's going to be no grapes to harvest. That was a catalyst that turned a vintage that was going to be a good vintage into a great vintage. What we found is that McLaren Vale had between 50 and 65 mil of rain. The Barossa averaged between 90 and 120 mil of rain. Clare even had up to 130 mil of rain over a 24 to 48 hour period. What it did was it freshened up the vines naturally. There's nothing that can replace irrigation, and rainfall from the sky into the earth is the greatest thing that can happen. Not ideal at vintage time, but it replenished the vines, replenished the canopies, and what we found is it slowed right down the maturation process. So vineyards that were really starting to run with no real great flavour, it pushed them back. They've ripened a lot slower. Alcohols in our wine are 1% down on average across every block this year. What we're finding is there's just amazing aromatics. Yields are on the lower side, but they're kind of very, very concentrated wines. I hate calling a vintage early. I really think that the wine is not wine until it's gone through its second fermentation, the bacterial fermentation of malolactic fermentation. So to me, I hate tasting things post-ferment and going, oh, this is great. But I have to say the aromas in the winery, the tannin profile in the winery is some of the strongest I've ever seen. I just hope that they develop down the path I'm hoping for over the next 6 to 8 months. This could be a phenomenal vintage for two hands.